bigger boat.
Attica! 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 Attica!
When this baby hits 88 miles per hour, you're gonna see some serious shit.
Tell me, doctor, where are we going this time? Is this the 50s or 1999?
Welcome to the 70s versus the 80s, my fellow retro pop culture loving babies.
My guitar and sing.
And if you ever kept score in bowling with a pencil, only to have your local bowling alley switch over to automated scoring, and you looked into that cold green chromatic screen and you realized not only was it not going to let you cheat, but you felt like you were looking into the face of the future, then this is the podcast for you.
Future.
Hello, everybody. This is Wolfman Mike on the mic, and I can talk 1975 blockbusters all night. I can talk 1985 blockbusters all night, but I cannot talk Rocky Horror Picture Show all night because, quite frankly, it freaks me out. I'm not sure why. That's on me. And as always, I am joined by Spunky Comstock himself. He's pretty fly for a Bry guy. It's Brian. And in case you can't remember what Brian sounds like, Brian sounds a little something like this.
I'm 6'5", 6'9" with the afro.
And as you can guess, folks, today we are talking the blockbuster movies from 50 years ago, 1975, versus the blockbuster movies from 40 years ago, 1985. I love when we do these shows, but today's, we have some very, very iconic movies included in these 2 years. So this is going to be a huge show. We're also going to talk the death of a famous baseball catcher. You might know him more as a comedian. So we're going to talk that at the end of the show. So let's get to it, shall we?
Mike on the mic, Wolfman Mike. Last year, I could kind of celebrate the new year. We took a look at the movies from the 70s and the 80s like they were 50 and 40 years ago. I'd like to repeat that on this episode. I think we should be taking a look at the 1975 and 1985 movies. This time I kind of want to look at the top 10 highest grossing films of these years and put them in our tier list. So I want to dust off the tier list that we did, and we used it for Fisher-Price toys. And, you know, you got to admit, you're waiting to have grandchildren so that you can play with Fisher-Price toys again. But we'll dust off that tier list. Of course, we don't do a tier list just the normal way here in the 70s versus 80s podcast. We put that 70s and 80s spin on it. So the tiers are, the best tier of all is the 1980 gold medal Olympic hockey team.
You believe in miracles? Yes!
The next best tier, the A tier, is the Michael Jackson music video Billie Jean. The B tier is when you got to go to school and the lunch was pizza.
Pizza Day.
Pizza Day. The C tier is the episode of Fonzie Jumping the Shark.
Here we go, Fonz! I'm heading for the ramp! Are you sure you want to do it?
Kind of goes with C, where it was great, but it's kind of starting to meander to its end. And then D tier, what was the worst pop culture thing that happened in the 70s and the 80s? It had to be Elvis dying on the toilet.
We're caught in a trap. I can't walk out.
Oh.
So let's get into it.
Let's do it.
So I have the 10th highest grossing movie of 1975 is Tommy, the film version of the Who's rock opera.
Sure plays a mean pinball. He stands like a statue, becomes part of the machine. Feeling all the bumpers, always plays clean. Plays by intuition.
Yeah, so we got Tommy. I don't remember much about Tommy at all. I think it actually had Roger Daltrey was in it. It had some big stars. Jack Nicholson was in it. Eric Clapton was in it. Tina Turner was in it. Elton John played the pinball wizard. The only thing, Tommy plays a pinball wizard, but he's supposed to be dumb, deaf, and blind. So is he really a pinball wizard? How would he even know? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
That's the question that perplexes the ages. Maybe that's what you should go watch that movie to find out. He also could have been maybe told that he was the Queen of England and President of the United States. We haven't talked much about The Who on this podcast. The Who, it's one of those things where I'll listen to it for like a day or so once every decade, kind of get my Who listening out of the way for another 10 years. So I wasn't big into The Who. It would, though, however, be a fantastic historical document to see those artists at that time. We talked about that in the Blues Brothers episode that's a time capsule of seeing like an Aretha Franklin, James Brown, Ray Charles at their prime. So here you're going to see The Who at their prime. You're going to see, like you said, Eric Clapton and Elton John, and you get to see them when they're young. And kind of, it's just like a historical document. That being said, I think I'm going to place this as the Fonzie Jumps the Shark, because I think The Who and having to go to a concept album and having a rock opera, whatever that means, that's the kind of showing that maybe the decline of their power as a band. What are your thoughts on the tier for the movie Tommy?
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you there, Brian. I think it's Fonzie Jumps the Shark.
Here we go, Fonz. I'm heading for the ramp. Are you sure you want to do it?
I'm like you. Everybody's like, The Who is musical genius. And I'm like, I should listen to them more. They're musical geniuses. I'll listen to 5 minutes of a song and I go, this is really good. Why don't I listen to this more? And then I'll listen to the second song and I go, oh yeah, I guess I've heard this before. So
Genius only goes so far.
I get bored of their music really quickly. But yeah, I'll go with Fonzie Jumps the Shark. I think that's a good place to put it.
All right. Number 9 is the movie The Other Side of the Mountain. It's kind of a drama romance. It's based on a true story. A woman skier from the United States who was going to be a big prospect for the 1956 Winter Olympics has a ski accident, becomes paralyzed, and this is kind of the romance journey of her trying to, overcome her paralysis.
In happy days, they had met on the other side of the mountain. Now, this wonderful guy was back when she needed him most to work his miracle of love. The true story of Jill Kinmont, the American Olympic contender, whose tragic fall took everything but her life.
I have never seen it, but I do know the story because being a big Olympics fan, you've heard of this, or at least I have.
Yeah. So I guess Beau Bridges is in this movie. He plays Dick Mad Dog Buick. This film centers on Jill Kinmont, a promising young ski racer whose life dramatically changes after a tragic accident. So yeah, I've never seen this movie either, but I like these 70s movies with when they would cover skiing and NASCAR and stuff. They did a really good job with the camera work, because remember, this is way, way before GoPros, and they would always do an amazing job with the camera work on these, which I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah, GoPros and drones.
That's about all I know about this movie. What are you thinking on this one, Brian?
Yeah, I think it's trying to be an uplifting tale of how you can still thrive after just a devastating change in your life. So for that, I don't want to rank it too low, but I haven't seen it, so I don't know that I can put it too high. So I'm thinking this is pizza for school lunch tier.
Ooh, there was even a sequel, The Other Side of the Mountain Part 2. Okay, we got to go. Yeah, let's go Pizza Day. Like I said, what I do know about this movie is it had some cool camera work. So let's go Pizza Day.
Absolutely. Maybe it kind of was a precursor of what Warren Miller would do with all those ski movies.
Yeah, so far the 70s is turning out with some kind of slow. Let's see if we can get into some movies we really know here.
All right, so the next one is Funny Lady. That was the 8th highest grossing film of 1975. All I know about Funny Lady is I'm pretty sure it's the sequel to Funny Girl, so it had Barbra Streisand in it. All the Barbra Streisand fans would flock to this. I know this is probably going to come to a surprise to our longtime valued listeners, but I'm not really a big Barbra Streisand fan.
Come on, Brian.
I'm an uncultured swine.
Not even Yentl, Brian?
Fanny Bryce was the greatest musical star of her time. And her success story will break your heart.
Am I blue?
Barbra Streisand is Fanny Bryce. She had fame. She had talent. She had class. But most of all, she had Billy. James Caan is Billy Rose, the wonder boy of Broadway.
Please, I wrote him, Billy Rose.
However, Funny Girl was a smash in '68. So this is kind of that, going to the sequel thing that the '70s started to perfect. And again, if you're a Barbra Streisand fan, I'm sure that this is a fantastic movie, but I'm going to show my limited knowledge of it and say
It also had James Caan in it. So this was the same year. It might be on our list coming up here. James Caan was also in Rollerball, which is a very, very different movie. It's almost like a Mad Max sports movie. It's just a really dark, violent movie. But he was also in Funny Lady at the same year.
showing that acting range. He's got the chops. He's got the acting chops.
What was 7 years before getting a sequel? That sounds like something they do today. I didn't know back in those days they waited a whole 7 years for a sequel too. That's crazy.
I think it was contracted they were going to do the sequel. I think Barbra Streisand dragged her legs on it, so maybe that was it. Maybe Babs was a little bit unwilling to grow up. She wanted to remain the funny girl. She didn't want to grow up and mature and become the funny lady.
You know what? Because of that, I'm thinking this is a movie me and you will probably never go back and watch. This is us putting our rating system. This is the American Film Institute's rating system. But I'm thinking, I hate to do it, Brian, but are you thinking Elvis Dies on the Toilet for this one, or what are you thinking?
I'm going to also go with this. Again, this is the 70s versus the 80s podcast. So, I mean, equal weight to the, Film Board of America or whatever. But yeah, Elvis Died on the Toilet. I just have no desire to watch this movie.
We're caught in a trap. I can't walk out.
Oh. All right, so Elvis has left the bathroom, or hasn't left the bathroom. All right. So what do we got for the next movie, Brian?
So number 7, 3 Days of the Condor. Kind of a drama movie, kind of a action drama movie. And you were the one that had brought up that it's based on a book, 6 Days of the Condor, and that we have to dumb books down for movie audiences, so it can only be 3 Days of the Condor for the movie audiences.
Yeah, I know when they make movies from a book, they have to consolidate some of the characters and stuff, but they have to consolidate from 6 Days of the Condor down to 3 Days of the Condor.
They must not add enough film to do 6 days.
What would they call, if they would have made a sequel, they could have gone to the missing 3 Days of the Condor. But yeah, I don't know much about it. It's Robert Redford.
It's directed by Sidney Pollack and starred Robert Redford, Faye Dunaway, Cliff Robertson. So, and the novel only came out the year before. So the novel must have hit the country by storm if they're going to make the novel into a movie like the following year.
Yeah, I think this is the first novel made into a movie that we're gonna cover a couple of those on this list here. So yeah, I know this movie had a huge impact. Obviously didn't have an impact on us. What are we thinking? Fonzie jumps the shark?
I don't know that you can take a mid-70s Robert Redford movie and do it that bad, but we could certainly do Fonzie jumps the shark for it.
Here we go, Fonz. I'm heading for the ramp. Are you sure you want to do it?
I mean, it's kind of, maybe it could be like a blueprint for all the different Mission Impossible movies that came out later, but then there was a Mission Impossible TV show, so maybe this was stealing from that. But again, stealing from a book and cutting it in half, that downgrades it.
Wow, I know 75's got some huge movies. So far, they've been kind of duds. Let's keep going here, Brian. Let's get something going here.
All right. Well, number 6 is The Return of the Pink Panther.
All right, now we're talking.
We got top-notch Peter Sellers as Inspector Clouseau, and David Niven, I think, is in this, all the Pink Panther movies. One of my favorite series from that age was the Pink Panther movies.
I think it's got one of the funniest concepts of movies ever is when Kato would attack Peter Sellers whenever he was least expecting it, and it was always hilarious. This might be the one where he comes ripping through the canopy of the bed and they get in a fight and the bed collapses, and then they have a nunchuck fight. He has to go through his nightstand to find his weapons. He's got all these weapons in there and he's clumsily trying to find it. I just think the whole Kato thing, he asked Kato to attack him when he least expects it. I don't even know if they talk about it in this movie. I think it's an earlier movie, and then you're supposed to just know that information later because he keeps getting jumped by Kato.
Yeah, it's the fourth film in the series, and the first three were in 63, 64, and 68. So then here's another one where they waited 7 years for the next film series. So I love the series. I love the Kato bit was just when you're a kid watching these, when you'd go into the TV guide and page through and find that the Pink Panther movie or Shot in the Dark or Inspector Clouseau, any of those were going to be on, you would give up playing outside to go in and watch this Kato try to surprise attack him.
Well, as soon as you heard that theme music, it had that very iconic theme music that would just draw you in. You're like, whoa, what are you doing here?
I think it's Henry Mancini, because I remember buying a CD when it tried to become less of an uncultured swine, and it was James Galway, the flautist, and one of them was he did the Pink Panther theme as a kind of a nod to Henry Mancini. So I think, that's a fantastic theme song. I mean, if we did movie theme song top tens or did a fantasy draft of movie theme songs, while people would be taking Jaws and like the Imperial Death March or whatever, I would be taking, one of mine would be the theme to the Pink Panther.
And I don't remember, did the Pink Panther cartoon have the same theme song? And I don't know how the two were related, the Pink Panther cartoon except that cartoon actually had a Pink Panther in it, which was always exciting as a kid.
Yeah, I think the cartoon came out of the films, because I think the cartoon started in 1969. And but I think Blake Edwards, the creator, would have created both the cartoon and the movies.
Okay, so what are we thinking for the Pink Panther here?
So my love of it is going to push it higher. I don't know that it's the best of the franchise, although the Kato part is brilliant. I'm going to say this is Michael Jackson's Billie Jean video tier.
I agree. This was the first one where we'd kind of be old enough to see the reruns of it, and it was very hilarious every time it came on TV. So let's go Billie Jean by Michael Jackson. Let's go. All right.
So number 5 is Dog Day Afternoon, and that's kind of a biographical crime drama with Pacino, John Cazale, Charles Durning, James Broderick. What's your thoughts on Dog Day Afternoon?
Oh, I love this movie. I went back and watched all the 70s movies that I was kind of too young to remember. And the thing about these 70s movies, they were dark and gritty. These independent movies, you had to take a shower after you watched them. They were just so dark and gritty. So I watched this. I watched 5 Easy Pieces, those kind of movies that I just had never seen before. And this one it's an amazing story. It's the two guys. I think it was based on a magazine article, The Boys in the Bank. There's these two guys that are not bank robbers that go to rob this bank. Sal and Stevie go to rob the First Brooklyn Savings Bank, and they get in there, and you think that they're being real quiet, and they get in there, and you're like, and it's still kind of getting tense, but you think they're doing a real good job. And then one of my favorite scenes of this movie is all of a sudden there's a phone call, and they go, "Sal, it's for you," and he's like, "I'm right. Nobody knows I'm here." He goes, "How's it for me?" So he goes and picks up the bank, and then he goes, "Hey, Sal, this is the police chief. What do you got going on in there?" He just says it calmly, and then he looks out the window, and the place is surrounded by the police, and you're like, "What the?" And then you just feel like you're caged in the rest of the movie. It's very, very dark and gritty. And this is the first movie where Al Pacino turns into Al Pacino. He starts doing the Attica. He starts going nuts.
Attica! 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 Attica!
Kind of overacting in this movie that we'll see in Scarface and the Hoorah and all the movies that come behind it. Do you have any memories of this movie, Brian?
Well, just that it did win the Oscar that year for Best Original Screenplay. And yeah, based on a Life magazine article. I mean, one, who remembers magazines anymore? But two, to have a film, and this critically acclaimed and also got butts in the seats, just based on an article. But it's movies when they're at their best are storytelling, and that's an interesting story that first is on the pages of Life magazine, and then someone decides to make a screenplay and turn it into a movie.
Yeah, and a great job by John Cazale, who's the co-star in this movie. John Cazale, he died real early. He had a terminal illness. But here's the movies he was in. He played Fredo in Godfather 1, Godfather 2. He was in Dog Day Afternoon because Pacino kind of thought of him as his good luck charm. So he's in these movies. But then he went over with Robert De Niro and Christopher Walken and was in The Deer Hunter. And by then he was really sick and they were kind of afraid he was going to die before The Deer Hunter was over.
Yeah.
And they're going to have to reshoot his scenes and stuff.
He had lung cancer.
And he was dating Meryl Streep during this whole time. But he had kind of a goofy looking guy. He had this goofy, the Simpsons like to made fun of his haircut in this movie because he had the receding hairline in front, but then super long hair in the back. So it was just really a striking look for this movie. So yeah, this movie's really dark and gritty. You need to take a shower after it. I mean, Al Pacino is like sweating during the whole movie. Well, I could have just said it starred Al Pacino because we knew he was sweating through the whole movie because what movie doesn't he sweat all the way through? So I really like this one. I was thinking Michael Jackson's Billie Jean video.
I'm with you.
But what are you thinking, Brian?
Yeah, I'm with you that this would be Michael Jackson's Billie Jean video. I mean, it's been put into the by the Library of Congress and put in the National Film Registry of Preservation before being culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. So it's kind of a touchstone of movie making. Like I said, of storytelling.
Yeah.
And John Cazale, he's basically the Scottie Pippen to Al Pacino's Michael Jordan in this, and the Scottie Pippen to Robert De Niro's Michael Jordan in The Deer Hunter.
That's a good way to put it. I like that.
Michael Jackson's Billie Jean video for Dog Day Afternoon. Coming in at number 4 is the movie Shampoo, which is a Warren Beatty vehicle. Warren Beatty before Dick Tracy.
Before Dick Tracy. Yeah, I saw this movie on TV when I was way, way too young. Here's another 70s movie that's kind of dark and gritty. All I know about this movie is it's kind of creepy, kind of creeped me out as a little kid. It's over-sexualized and everything. Shouldn't have been watching it. All I can remember is I think it's about Warren Beatty being a heterosexual hairdresser. So he has all this access to these women. And I guess women kind of think Warren Beatty's a good-looking dude and stuff.
Columbia Pictures presents Shampoo. It's the story of a Beverly Hills hairdresser named George.
George is great. Yeah, George is great.
And all the beautiful people he does.
Listen, you're great. I thought you were great.
And hilarity ensues from there. But I thought it was dark and creepy. I don't know. Do you have any memories of this movie, Brian?
I've not seen it, so it would just be a historical document of a young Warren Beatty, and people can make up their minds on if he was attractive or not. And kind of throwing into that the sexual revolution of the late 60s, kind of telling of that story.
Yeah. So it kind of creeped me out. I'm thinking Fonzie Jumped the Shark, or should we go?
Fonzie Jumped the Shark is good enough for this one.
Okay, Fonzie Jumped the Shark.
Here we go, Fonz. I'm heading for the Ram. Are you sure you want to do it?
All right, quickly moving on. I want to get away from that movie.
All right. Number three is become a cult classic, which if it's a cult classic, that means I've never seen it. And it is the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
I've unfortunately have seen it. This movie is beloved, though, Brian. This movie's really beloved. You have to see it at the movie theater because they have like people dress in costume, people throw rice at the wedding scene. Some movie theaters had where kind of rain on you a little bit. That's mostly what I think about it. I think of the fanaticism that goes with this movie.
Yes.
More than watching the movie itself.
It's so dreamy. Oh, fantasy free me.
It's the storyline, I don't get it. I know people will love this movie, but I just don't get the storyline.
Yeah, it's basically it's a stage production from '73 that became a movie, and Tim Curry, Susan Sarandon. Again, I've never seen it. I know that it's popular. I know I have friends that love to go see it and dress up and be part of it. And I guess as a boring, middle-aged Midwestern dad,
yeah,
that's not my thing.
Yeah, I know people really get into it, and where the crowd starts screaming the lines along with the movie, and the crowd's kind of like a part of the movie. But yeah, I'm with you, Brian.
Yeah, you go as much to be part of the crowd than to watch the movie.
I don't get it.
No, I don't either.
So what are we going to rate this one?
I'm going to say school lunch pizza because, yay, it was pizza. You're part of it. It's better than the other school lunches, but it's school-made pizza. It's not as good as going to a good pizzeria. So
I think it'd be fun to play dress up and go to it once, but then unfortunately you'd have to watch the movie when you're there, and it's just...
Yeah, I mean, if you could have all the fun beforehand with the dress up and then leave before the movie starts, that'd be perfect.
All right.
Like some of the tailgates for a football game and it never goes inside.
Perfect analogy. All right, let's move on here.
All right. So we're running down to the last two. We have One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It's kind of a psychological comedy drama film. Milos Forman, the great Czech director. And of course, it is Jack Nicholson who has his handprints all over this movie, but it also has Danny DeVito, Louise Fletcher as the dominating.
Danny DeVito has hair in this one. He's very young.
Yeah, a young Danny DeVito. Back before he lost all his hair eating Jersey Mike subs. And Christopher Lloyd's in it as well.
That other creepy bald guy that kind of looks a little bit like Christopher Lloyd. Will Sampson. He would just always play the creepy guy. So yeah, it had all the star power. I like Chief as one of my favorite characters of the movie. Has a very surprise ending to it that I really enjoy without giving away the ending. Yeah, it's got some memorable scenes. It's got Jack being Jack. This is 5 years before The Shining, which I can't believe because he seems like he ages about 15 years before The Shining. So this is kind of along with The Shining, I'd say this is his most iconic role. He was in 5 Easy Pieces where he's like, I want a ham sandwich. So those are kind of his big roles. So this is definitely an iconic, and this is one of my father's favorite films ever. So what are we thinking here, Brian?
I'm totally on board with this film. I love this film. This is one of the first cinematic masterpieces I got to watch as a kid. And One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is Olympic gold medal winning hockey tier.
You believe in miracles? Yes!
To the people nowadays who don't realize, that cleaning up the air and take, not people not smoking cigarettes as much helps us stay younger. Watch the transformation of Jack Nicholson from 1975 to 1980, and you'll appreciate that we don't smoke as much and that we've cleaned up the air.
I think Jack was doing some other things that might have progressed his aging.
Well, there's that.
All right, so are we all the way up to number 1 already of 1975?
And that leaves us with number 1. This movie grossed more than twice as much as One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. This was just a juggernaut. If you've listened, a long-time fan of this podcast, we've talked about this movie before because it's maybe the first true blockbuster. It's Steven Spielberg's movie classic, Jaws.
Yeah, this is the first summer blockbuster movie of all time. Lines are all the way down the street. Quentin Tarantino calls this the best movie of all time. If not, he says it's the best movie, if not the best film of all time. I'm never sure what the difference is on those two, but I agree with them. I think it's the best summer blockbuster movie of all time. Got Steven Spielberg, 29 years old. They were having total production times during this problems with this movie. Just ends up being the greatest movie of, I agree. I think it's the greatest movie of all time.
Yeah, it checks all the boxes. It's got a great soundtrack. It has that song that draws you in, and it's this iconic song.
John Williams just doing those simple notes.
Yeah, simple. Sometimes simple is better. Great storytelling. That triangulation, that last 30 minutes of the movie, it's drawing you in. It's drawing you into the danger without really showing the danger much. So it's building that apprehension and tension that you don't get nowadays when you'd have 3D special effects sharks all over the place and making it worse. This is the unknown and the fear of the unknown and what could happen, and it's just such a wonderful storytelling. It deserves to be the first blockbuster.
Yeah, the last half of the movie with those, the 3 men that kind of play like 3 different viewpoints of a 1970s male. It's the dialogue. If you're going back to watch this movie, I think they're going to re-release it for 50 years. And hopefully they re-release it in that, you just said 3D. Hopefully they re-release it in the 3D version because I saw it a couple years ago in the theater with my daughter. on the 3D version, and it's probably the best movie going experience I've ever had. It was just, you got the best movie of all time, and then it was just really great. This time, if you go back to watch the movie, I always watch a different aspect. Maybe listen to the dialogue, because I think the dialogue is just as, between the three men, is just as good as Goodfellas, Pulp Fiction. I put it up there as one of my best dialogue movies ever.
Aiming fish, eh? Marlin, stingray, been through this piano wire. Don't you tell me my business again. You get back on the bridge.
That doesn't prove a damn thing.
Well, it proves one thing, Mr. Hooper. It proves that you wealthy college boys don't have the education enough to admit when you're wrong.
We talked about it in the Jaws episode, so if you don't want to go back and listen to it, which I encourage you to go back and listen to, it's a pretty good episode. We talked about how nowadays the summer blockbuster formula is a witty quip from one of the heroes, and then some kind of huge action explosion, and then another witty quip from one of the heroes, kind of the Marvel way of doing it with like Tony Stark and Thor and all those kind of creatures, and the space captain, star captain, or starman, whoever Chris Pratt plays. This was a time when you needed to have that intensity, and the drama was built on well-crafted dialogue. And so that's something that now misses, I think, from the summer blockbusters, is the great writing and great dialogue, and they kind of rely too much on having these huge budgets for special effects and explosions and action, and we miss the great dialogue, and this movie harkens back to that day.
There's our 1975 list there. Started out kind of slow, but ended with a bang. Did we give this one a rating here? I think we all know what we're rating Jaws.
Yeah, it's Olympic gold medal, 1980 hockey Olympic gold medal. It was...
You believe in miracles? Yes!
Just as big a cultural moment in the United States as that Jaws swept the nation. I mean, it was appointment TV when it was first on television, like on the ABC Sunday night movie of the week or whatever. Yeah,
I think it was the biggest movie of all time when it came on the ABC movie of night, which was good for me to see it because we were so young, we were too young to see it when it came out in the theater. But the older kids would describe it to me, and then I'd go describe it to my friends, and then when I finally seen it, I go, "Hey, my description wasn't too far off. That's pretty crazy."
So 75 dropped us a masterpiece of movie making. All right, so then I think we'll put the close on this and get ready to move on to what 1985 has in store for us.
Yeah, let's see what 1985, 40 years ago today, can do. All right.
Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men?
Turn your dial to find the frequency of the past.
Captain Advice.
Where the classic stories of mysteries, sci-fi, thrillers, and suspense are found waiting to be heard once again.
Another case for Nick Carter, Master Detective.
You'll find a variety of those stories here, in their original form, where each episode takes you to another place or time.
The Man of Bronze, Doc Savage.
But only when you find the mystery frequency. Available everywhere.
The Shadow knows.
So Mike on the mic, Wolfman Mike. So the list I have here, I just pulled 10 of the most interesting movies that were in the top 14 grossing in 1985. So some of them might have been released late in 1984. I just wanted to show that we here at the 70s versus 80s podcast are always about constant improvement.
Yeah, you can't get two websites to agree on the top 10 grossing movies. That's pretty crazy, but none of them seem to agree. So we just took the ones that we wanted to talk about. So let's get into it, Brian.
All right. So we're going to kick it off. Number 10, putting him in our tiers, is Fletch. This would be after Caddyshack, another Chevy Chase comedy vehicle where he plays surprise. I mean, he's maybe getting out of character here. He's playing a bumbling kind of guy who kind of just sashays through life without much of a care. And then, of course, there's the whole I'm 6'5", 6'9" with the afro bit.
He is actually 6'5" with the afro 6'9". Pretty good dribbler.
That's an amazing bit. Chevy Chase kind of plays himself here. A lot of people, I don't know, it seems like a lot of people think that their favorite Chevy Chase movie, I'm more into Caddyshack and Vacation. But yeah, this is definitely a top 3 for Chevy.
Yeah, it's one of his better movies. It's really kind of starring him, where you could say that Caddyshack was an ensemble piece where he was just part of it.
Yeah.
But for me, Fletch, I don't know if the Chevy Chase humor kind of has died out by now. I'm thinking this is School Pizza Lunch Day for the tier.
I agree with you, Brian. I'm going School Pizza Lunch.
All right. Number 9, National Lampoon's European Vacation, second in the National Lampoon Vacation series. I just think that this is that they saw the Great Muppet Caper, where they went to Europe and they tried to just steal that thunder, even though it was released like 4 or 5 years after the Great Muppet Caper. So that's my thought on European Vacation. What's your thought on National Lampoon's European Vacation?
Yeah, it's got the different kid actors. I heard that theory that the odd numbers, because, then Christmas Vacation comes out, and I think that's the third one. So the first one, third, some people said the odd number ones are good, but the even number ones aren't as good. So, it's got some good moments, but yeah, I prefer Christmas as my second favorite vacation movie. Yep.
Is this a Fonzie jump in the shark kind of tier level for this one?
Definitely.
Here we go, Fonz. I'm heading for the ramp. Are you sure you want to do it?
All right. Well, in number 8, we're going strong with the sequels. We have the Police Academy 2. And, Police Academy hit and kind of took off. So, of course, the 80s seems to be the beginning of the land of the sequels, although I guess they had the Godfather series in the 70s. What's your thoughts on Police Academy 2?
Well, I think they go on to make 8 of them. I think a bunch of them are direct-to-video, which would now be called direct-to-streaming. But, so is this back in training? Yeah, I think the first one was good. And the second, I think by the third one, I can't remember which one had Bobcat was the big star of it. Maybe it was this one, because Bobcat kind of steals the show, Bobcat Goldthwait.
Yeah.
So I think this one's still pretty good. I think they start to lose it later.
This was their first assignment, and then back in training. So obviously, that would insinuate that the first assignment didn't go very well.
There you go.
And it's a comedy, so of course it doesn't go very well.
So I'm thinking, school lunch pizza day. What are you thinking?
School Lunch Pizza Day is a good place for this. This is not the gem that the first one was. Next, we have a serious movie, Witness. This had Harrison Ford in it.
Yeah, Harrison Ford and Kelly McGillis. And don't blink, because she's in this, and then she's in Top Gun, and then she's hard to find after that. She does go topless for a second on this one. I think she was still pretty young when they made this movie. Oh, come on, Brian. You don't remember this movie? The barn raising scene. It was so much dramatic when the barn raising. It's got to be the most dramatic barn raising scene in modern American cinema history.
Well, the breadth of the barn raising scene cinematic universe is pretty deep, and I think Witness does do it best.
So yeah, I'm feeling school lunch pizza again on this.
I'm all with you on School Lunch Pizza. Did you want to do an impromptu guess the Forever Young with Kelly McGillis and how old she was in this movie?
I think I'm cheating. I think I looked it up. Was she 18?
Well, she was born in 57. The movie came out in 84, so she would have been 27.
Wow.
No, it came out in 85. She'd have been 28, probably 27 during filming, 28 when the movie came out.
Well, that makes sense, because she was topless. I thought there was some controversy. Oh, because she played a 17-year-old, and I think she went topless in it.
That could be the controversy.
That's what the controversy was, yeah.
That makes this movie feel like it should have been in the 70s.
Yeah, but Kelly McGillis, you blink and you miss her, because it's this and Top Gun, and I don't know, maybe she was in a Tide commercial. I don't remember.
All right. But we got it placed in the school lunch pizza category?
Yeah,
just because of the Amish barn raising?
Yeah, that's basically the cinematic best part of the movie, really. Yeah.
Well, then number 6 is the movie Goonies.
Yeah, Brian, what do you think of this movie? Well, I want to hear what your thoughts are.
So it's that just to get together, maybe somewhat kind of misfits. Either they're misfit with each other, they're misfits of society. They kind of go on an adventure together. I think it's considered like an adventure comedy film.
Okay, Brian, me and you we're in our mid-50s. We're in our mid-50s. This movie, from people in their mid-40s to their low 50s, they just love this movie. They can't stop talking about it. I try watching it. My TV turns itself off after 10 minutes. It's like, we're not going to do this. I just don't get it.
You must have a smart TV.
Yeah, I got a smart TV. I think we missed it. It's like the people a couple years younger than us just love this movie. It's got Sean Astin, who would go on to be Rudy and Rudy. It's got Josh Brolin. This is kind of a prequel to No Country for Old Men for him, I think. I mean, it's got Corey Feldman, who would go on to be, he's like I don't know if you've been following him lately, but he's like a Marilyn Manson type rocker now. It's just magic if you see him online.
Talking about misfits.
So it's got all the actors in it that would go on to be big. I think me and you were just slightly too old for it because I just don't get it. I remember it was on all the cereal boxes that super ugly Goonie guy, and I'm like, why do I want to see this ugly guy when I'm eating my cereal in the morning trying to read the back of the cereal box and I got this ugly guy on it? I think we were just slightly too old for it, but
maybe. So where do we draw the line on this? Is this Elvis on the toilet, or is it just...
Yeah, let's go Elvis Dying on the toilet, because that'll make our listeners mad, because everybody just loves this movie.
Yes. We're not afraid of the controversy here at the 70s versus the 80s. You can direct your comments at Mike on the Mic, Wolfman Mike, or at Spunky Comstock. We have thick enough skins we can take it.
We're caught in a trap. I can't walk out.
All right. So then number 5, Cocoon. We're basically including it here. I mean, it was one of the top box office of that year. Also, we get to talk about Wilford Brimley.
Here's our Forever Young right here. How old is Wilford Brimley in this movie when he's acting in this movie?
I know if you go way back into our archives, as one of the, I think the material-wise is one of the best episodes we ever did. Sound quality, one of maybe the worst. We talked about baseball. We talked about the movie The Natural, which would have came out a year before Cocoon, and that Robert Redford was the kid that had promise and then runs into an incident and then doesn't come back to the major leagues until he's like in his late 30s. And his manager's old-looking guy is Wilford Brimley, and they're like 4 years apart in age. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking it was Redford was like 48 and Brimley was 52. So I'm going to say Wilford Brimley was 53 for the filming of in Cocoon when it came out in 1985.
Well, Chloe, you're pretty good at this, Brian. He was 51, so you're not off by much. But was he playing a 70 something? He's supposed to be in his 70s?
Yes. Well, and he just played the old man manager the year before in The Natural, so he was typecast as old.
Like you said, he was just 4 years older than Robert Redford in that movie, yeah.
He was old when he was young.
And then he was doing what, heart diabetes commercials?
Diabetes medicine for diabetes.
Diabetes. So what are we going with Cocoon? Ron Howard directed it. I have a problem with Ron Howard movies. I don't know. I love Ron Howard, but his movies kind of bum me out. I don't know.
And he was fantastic in Happy Days, but the movies are...
Yeah, they're not my favorite.
People like them, but I guess not you and I. Are we going to have back-to-back Elvis on the Toilets trying to get the ire of our audience?
Yeah, let's go back-to-back. People love this movie, too. Let's go back-to-back Elvis on the Toilet.
All right, Elvis on the Toilet for Cocoon.
We're caught in a trap. I can't walk out.
We'll never get Elvis off that toilet.
Message Mike on the Mic for your complaints. Rocky 4. So is Rocky also hold it where the odd number ones are better than the even number ones? I mean, Rocky 4 sold a lot of tickets in 1985.
It's a classic 80s. It's just all its excess. It's got maybe the most famous montage, working out montage of the 80s. And
yes,
from there on, the 80s was just all working out montages.
It just started a trend in lazy filmmaking and film exposition is the montage.
Yeah, he's doing sit-ups in the loft of the barn, and he's climbing a mountain screaming, Drago!
Drago! Drago!
Yeah, for all its excess, I just love this movie. I think I like Rocky 3 better, but I think most people go 4 over 3. It's all its excess. It's 80s. It's just so 80s. Maybe the most 80s movie. It's not perfect. Sure, it's not perfect. Can't we all just get along on this, Brian? That's what Rocky yells at the Soviet crowd at the end.
Yeah, we can all get along. I'm saying you're Fonzie jumps the shark because we're four into the series, It's kind of following that Happy Days trajectory, fantastic launch, meanders in the middle, Fonzie jumps the shark, and it kind of dies off.
Okay, well,
I think that's what my thought is on Rocky 4. We did a whole episode on Rocky about 3-4 years ago as well.
Okay, I mean, I like it. I was going to go school lunch pizza, but we'll go with your Fonzie jumps the shark.
Are you sure you want to do it?
Okay, Fonzie jumps the shark just because I think it's the analogy fits better. And it's not the only Sylvester Stallone movie we're going to talk about in this list. All right, number 3 would be the movie that was launched in December of 84, but had huge ticket sales, was like 3rd or 4th most ticket sales in 1985. Eddie Murphy's, I think by far his best movie, the original Beverly Hills Cop.
Ooh, the original Beverly Hills Cop. Yeah, this has got 1984 feel to it, but it was big in 85. I love this. I mean, I'm a huge Eddie Murphy fan, so this was a big thing in my life. I think I went and saw it the first week it came out. Just love it. It's got the Glenn Frey soundtrack to it. The heat is on.
It's a very good soundtrack.
Axel F, that's a song we kind of use in our commercials and stuff all the time. That's a big song. Eddie Murphy, yeah, just his wisecracking, fish out of water, coming from Detroit to go be a LA cop. How about the LA cops? Judge Reinhold was a big part of this movie, and the other actor just died just last year, I think. So, of course, I'm a big fan of this. What do you think, Brian?
I think this could be our first Olympic hockey, 1980 Olympic hockey gold medal tier. I think it deserves it.
Oh, I didn't know if you'd let me go that high, but let's do it.
Oh yeah, it's good.
Do you believe in miracles? Yes!
The sequel that came out in, I think, 87 was the first movie I went to by myself, not by myself, that I went to an R rating and I took a date with, but the date was 15.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. That's just the way I rolled back then.
That's a story for another show, I think.
Well, it was 17 and 15. You're in the same class together. The language class. Not that I was stupid and was held back. I'm sure you all already know that if you've listened to the show long enough.
I think we got another episode coming up here. We're going to have to hear about this. All right, Brian.
I think so.
Moving along quickly, Brian. Moving along quickly.
I'm trying to keep this fast-paced for our listeners so that while they're out and about, they can be entertained. Number 2, and it's actually a lot closer to the number 1 one than what the 1975 was, where Jaws just wiped the floor with everybody. Number 2, Rambo First Blood Part 2. So the first sequel in the Rambo series was Stallone, John Rambo. Go ahead, Mike.
This is Sylvester Stallone's, we might as well call this list, this is his apex. I mean, he's in Rambo 2, he's in Rocky 4. Both of them made a ton of money, obviously, as they're up here. So he's kind of beating Chevy Chase. Chevy Chase he's in 2 sequels, or he's in Fletch, his solo project, but then he was in European Vacation. So Sylvester Stallone had a bigger year than Chevy Chase, even though both of them have 2 movies in the top 10, which is just nuts for both of them. Yeah, this is all Sylvester Stallone. I really liked First Blood, so I went out and saw this like the first week it came out in the theaters. I still think First Blood's the better. It's more of an independent movie. Had that independent 70s. It almost felt like those 70s movies we were talking about in the first section.
Yep.
And then Rambo came on, and it was the 80s. Like we're talking about, just everything big, in excess 80s. Has him shows the montage where he's getting the weapons ready and where he's flexing as he puts his bandana on his head, because you can't go to war without a bandana tied around your head. I mean, you have to flex when you're putting it on. So, yeah, this is just all 80s all the way. What do you think, Brian?
I think this kind of falls into when we talk about bands and how their initial records kind of have that raw feel, but there's something, especially the bands you love, that there's something new to them, something unique, this quality that draws you in, and that's kind of like Rambo, the original Rambo, the original Rocky. And then as you get better at movie making, you make and better at making albums, you make these more polished movies, and you kind of are extending the stories up, but you kind of lose a little bit of that rawness that originally drew you in and told the story so well. That's my thoughts on Rambo First Blood Part 2. And I would say I could go Michael Jackson's Billie Jean video for this one for the tier.
All right, let's do it.
I don't know, I wouldn't go higher than that, but I know that you hold sway on this. You can push it up if you.
No, I wouldn't go any higher than that. Like I said, I like the first movie. I like the dark, gritty, independent movie better than this. This one was all 80s, though. If you love 80s stuff, you'll watch this in Rocky 4, because you'll be having 80s. You'll have Rubik's Cubes coming out of your eyeballs. You'll be so 80s, yeah.
And for those modern, younger listeners that weren't alive in the 80s, yes, Americans preferred violence and stuff like that over goofy comedy, even in the 80s. Preferring Stallone and Rambo and Rocky over Chevy Chase and Fletch in European Vacation. Which brings us to the number one movie of 1985. Michael J. Fox, Back to the Future, Christopher Lloyd. Really good storytelling, another kind of a unique approach to a story by bringing someone back and then back to the future.
Back in time.
Yes.
So, yeah, this is, in 75, we had the iconic Jaws at number one. And then in 85, we got Back to the Future at number one. These movies are just iconic in American film culture. Yeah, I mean, it's Michael J. Fox at the height of his power, Christopher Lloyd. You even had Huey Lewis. I went and saw this in the first week, too, just because I was a big Huey Lewis fan, and he has a little cameo in it. Very forgettable cameo. So, very cool story. There's parts of the story that we still say, talk about the DeLorean. I got to jump in my DeLorean and go back, or,
88 miles an hour. Yeah.
Yeah, this movie gets quoted all the time in popular culture. What do you think about it, Brian?
Yeah, it's Michael J. Fox before he got struck with Parkinson's, and he was still kind of hot from Family Ties. We touched base on Family Ties in past episodes. Big show of the early 80s, and I think it's just a fantastic movie. Of course, it spawned a couple sequels, and to be number one over like a Rambo when Rambo was hot, and Beverly Hills Cop that had a fantastic Eddie Murphy performance. It's saying something that the citizens of 85 loved it. I think we still love it today, and that's Olympic hockey gold medal tier in my book.
You believe in miracles? Yes!
It's kind of interesting, like you said, Michael J. Fox would later get Parkinson's. I think he's quoted himself as saying he goes back and watches this movie and he could see little ticks of himself where he thinks he can see it, I think, but I don't know if anybody else can, but yeah.
I think sometimes when you know something and you go back and look at stuff, you kind of, your mind fills in that maybe you're seeing stuff that's not actually there. But that's an interesting thing you bring up.
All right, Brian, let's just wrap this up. What list? We did the 70s, we did the 80s. Which one kind of blows you away the most?
I love the Pink Panther movie. We love Jaws, but I think the depth of the 85, as much as I hate to say it, the depth of the 85 movies outweighs the depth of the 75 movies. And even though my heart usually lies with the 70s, I have to go with the facts here and say that the 85 movies were better.
So we're going to have a little controversy. I'm going with 70s. I like the independent, these movies were just kind of all, now they're iconic, so we don't think of them as independent, but all those independent movies busting out in the 70s. I like the 70s and 90s are my favorite decades for movies, because the 90s, same thing. They had the Miramax, all the independent movies coming out. The 80s are great if you like we talked about, blockbuster, in your face, sequel. Definitely a big decade and it's interesting, we're looking at the 75 and 85, so we're looking at the smack middle of these decades here. But I kind of like the dirty, grimy 70s more than I like the blockbuster 80s. Maybe I'm trying to be cool, maybe I'm trying to be controversial, but that's how I lie. So that's interesting. We both have a different take on it there. So
split decision. We're allowed to have free thought apart from each other here at the 70s versus 80s podcast. I know that's why you love us.
All right, Brian. Well, you know what we love doing on this podcast is going back in time. So let's go back in time and get on to our next segment.
Hey, Mark, we made it.
We did.
Do you like it here? Check this out. Are you loving this?
Oh, it's the 70s versus 80s podcast, isn't it?
Yeah, this is the one I was telling you about.
Oh, I'm a child of the 80s. I love this kind of stuff.
Well, you were born in the 70s.
I was born in the 70s.
And I was born in 1980, so...
Exactly. So I feel kind of at home here. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know where else I feel at home is on our podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike had been nice enough to allow us a little bit of time on their show to plug our two shows, the Film Studies podcast and the Or Is It Movie podcast. Both you can find on Spotify, Apple Tunes, anywhere you get your favorite podcasts. So until we meet again, this is Derek saying, I want my MTV.
And I mean Mark. Dad, oh my!
He was only looked like 55 when he died. He was a friend of mine. Those are people who died. Those are people who
Mike on the Mic. As you know, we do use this show to, kind of pay tribute to those that have passed, those that were in the 70s and 80s and even the subsequent decades. And we have one that I think touched both of our lives, and that is the middling baseball player, but wonderful, fantastic broadcaster, and truly one of the funniest humans to ever live, and that is Bob Uecker.
Yeah, he was a very funny man. I think my first introduction, he kind of played before we were born or whatever, but I remember him doing the Miller Lite commercials, where I must be in the front row as maybe one of the top 10 funniest commercials ever made. And then, when they had the big Miller Lite commercials, he'd always come breaking through at the end saying, and they'd all be making fun of him. John Madden, all those guys would be making fun of him and stuff, but very funny man.
Yeah, he didn't mind having fun being poked at him, because he kind of poked at it himself. I mean, you listen to him when you see segments of him being on Carson. I think I first would have saw him on the Carson show, and then I think that's about the same time that he started doing those Miller Lite commercials where he would come on and he'd talk about how they would have him be the catcher for knuckleball pitchers, because he didn't mind getting up and walking and picking the ball up from in front of the backstop because it got by him all the time. And how about sometimes that, he'd go 0 for June and July, or that if he'd get off to a hot start, he'd have to pace himself, because then they'd expect that every year. All this funny stuff that on the Carson show. And I think that kind of picked up the Miller Lite people to kind of take him that he was Mr. Baseball and that he was this big thing. To my day, that might be one of my. I disagree with you about it being top 10. I think it's a top 5 commercial of all time. It's one of my favorite commercials. The first time you saw it, you just broke out laughing at a commercial. He's talking about, I go to the game, the fans recognize me. He's going to his seat, and then the ushers come over and say, "Mr. Uecker," because he got tickets from the ball club, right? Recognizing his contributions to the baseball team, and he's like, "I must be in the front row," and then they fade out and fade back in, and he is in like the second to last row of the stadium, yelling at the umpires, "You missed the call."
One of the best things about being an ex-big leaguer is getting freebies to the game. Call the front office, bingo. And once these fans recognize me, I probably won't even have to pay for my light beer from Miller. Down it, I love them. These fans know I drink light because it's less filling and it tastes great. Good seats, huh?
You're in the wrong seat, buddy. Come on.
Oh, I must be in the front row.
Come on.
Light beer from Miller. Everything you always wanted in a beer, and less.
Good seats, hey, buddy. He missed the tag. He missed the tag.
Brilliant advertisement concept, works to his personality and everything perfect. When I talk about going to the 1991 World Series where we were like 4 or 5 rows in front of the Jumbotron in left field, I said we had Bob Uecker seats. I mean, it became ubiquitous to the culture. Mm-hmm. And then he played himself essentially in Major League, and they didn't even script anything for him. He just ad-libbed, because he would be that way, just these funny, perfectly timed riffs on baseball and things like that. Then hear stories like you get Norm Macdonald has these stories about him. It's just, he was just truly a funny human being, and from all accounts, a wonderful human being.
Yeah, and I forget that he was in WrestleMania. I mean, he started out doing, after The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, he went on to do Bob Uecker's Wacky World of Sports, Bob Uecker's War of the Stars. I don't remember that one. But then he would go do Monday Night Baseball, being an announcer, where he was always funny, but he had to be a little more serious there. And like you said, he just made that. He was the funniest part of Major League, the movie, which was a very funny movie. And so to say he was the funniest part of it is the biggest tribute I can give to him.
Vaughn into the windup in his first offering. Just a bit outside. He tried the corner and missed. Ball 4. Ball 8. Low, and Vaughn has walked the bases loaded on 12 straight pitches.
Well, he played for 6 seasons, 1962 through 67. So your last season would have been 67. So he had those 6 seasons. And then he started for his hometown, because he's born in Milwaukee. He started being the radio announcer for the Brewers in 1971. And then that and his broadcasting and his appearances on the late night shows like Carson kind of brought him to being the Mr. Baseball, got him to those Miller Lite commercials. This does bring up something that I know you and I both kind of want to do as a future episode. We'd love feedback from you, our valued listeners, is just kind of how important the radio was to us in the 70s and then starting to fade out maybe in the 80s, and it's kind of almost gone now, where the radio is just something you put on in the car when you decide you don't want to stream music or have your directions on your phone. But you'd listen to every baseball game at night while you're outside playing, and every area had, of course, their iconic announcers. There's Mel Allen in New York, Vin Scully in Los Angeles, Ernie Harwell in Detroit, Uecker in Milwaukee. We had Herb Carneal here in the Twin Cities for the Twins, and just you hear their voices. So if you're in that Milwaukee area, grew up being a Milwaukee Brewers fan, when you hear Bob Uecker's voice, you would just be transported back to your childhood. Same thing if I ever hear a clip of Herb Carneal, or I'm sure people that live in the Los Angeles area with Vin Scully. And then just the characters on the radio that we had in the 70s that the kids today really don't have, and the magic it is, I think.
Oh, I'm going to sound even older than that. I'm going to sound like old man Mike here. But back in our day, you'd get on the AM radio and you'd start spinning that dial, and you would try to get Chicago Cub games in. You try to get, I think sometimes you could even get Atlanta games in here in the Twin Cities, but you could get Milwaukee games, Chicago. You just kind of St. Louis. You'd spin the dial and they'd be crackly, but you'd get it halfway in between the stations, but you could hear other games. And before the internet, that was what we did for fun, folks. It was
how you traveled. Did you hear advertisements then about different parts of the country if you're listening to these other broadcasts? Because, they would kick up, some channels could kick up their wattages at night, and then it would travel much further over the country. Different era. Yes, we're old, but that's kind of what the Bob Uecker, the passing, the people that listen to his broadcasts are remembering him for that. We're all remembering him for Major League, for his appearances on The Tonight Show, for being in the Miller Lite movies. He has a TV show that we're going to talk about in an upcoming episode when we're going to kind of do the 75 and 85 TV shows that debuted as our, looking back at 40 and 50 years ago. He even was on a TV show for a while. So he kind of dabbled in everything and was a character, was a larger-than-life character that we got to appreciate during his lifetime.
Yeah, appreciate Bob Uecker, just watching his career, and we feel like we're in the front row just watching his career there.
He made everyone feel like they're in the front row.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the 70s versus the 80s. Keep it classy, my fellow babies. This is Wolfman Mike signing out. I would like to thank Brian Malika for co-producing this episode with me. Of course, Brian Malika was produced by drinking High C out of a steel can. Remember, back in those days, we didn't have the lead poisoning restrictions that we have today, so you guys do the math. Join us again for our Super Bowl spectacular episode coming soon.
This has been a Secret Suburbs Studio podcast.
I remember it was on all the cereal boxes. They had that super ugly Goonie guy, and I'm like, why do I want to see this ugly guy when I'm eating my cereal in the morning trying to read the back of the cereal box? I get this ugly guy on it.